As I said, everybody here's got a story to. Everybody's story, look to your right, look to your left, look behind you. Every one of us got a broken story. Now we're men, we're prideful. Talk about our broken story, about the shortfalls we got. You got the opportunity to see two young men. My only regret was I didn't get to share the other 46 stories with you. Had 48 football players on that team. 40 didn't have fathers. 7 dads in prison. 1 mom in prison. Center's dad commits suicide before one of our games. The right tackle's mom dies of cancer right during the season. 2-0 for the first time since the second football program in the state of Iowa to this day. We get ready to play Newton, and my linebacker gets shot in the face the day before the game. So those are the type of things that go through these young men's minds. But I got to show you 2 stories. And with broken stories we all have, most of us have had gentlemen, people in our lives come alongside of us and help us with our spiritual journey. And a lot of these young men didn't have that opportunity to have people come alongside them. I was fortunate enough to have a group of coaches, because the number 1 rule of leadership, surround yourself with great people. That number 1 rule of leadership, surround yourself with great people. And I was going to hire coaches that did 4 things, had nothing to do with football. Even when I interviewed for the job, they say, you don't have any football goals here. I said, well, first I got to get the kids coming to school. Second thing, I got to get them being on time. And then when they're there, I got to have them ready to learn. And then we'll get into the football aspect of it. But I surrounded myself with great men. And the 4 things I expected out of them, which are keys to being a servant leader. Everybody here today is a servant leader in some way, shape, or form. The first is, I wanted my coaches to model what right is. You're going to model what the right thing to do is. And why do I say that? We have 180 days in the school year, and a lot of the time we knew the problem was at home. And so if during that 7-hour block during the school day and then practice for 2 hours, we got a shot at changing some of their lives. You're going to model. The next thing you're going to do, you're going to motivate. You're going to inspire these young men. You're going to provide an environment that is conducive for these young men to want to come to practice. Just like when you want people coming to work with a good attitude and a case of hustle, same thing I wanted. Okay, if you look at great leaders and great businesses out there, the people come to work on Monday like they left on Friday. I don't know if that makes sense. Most people on Friday are getting out of Dodge. Okay? But I wanted my coaches to foster that environment. And the only way you can do that is getting to know people's story. Whether it be Mary today, her story, right? She grew up in Wausau. Who served us today? Serve. My message is servant leadership. Born and raised here. Here she is, been working here for 15 years. I got David who set this stuff up for me. He's got a story. His story needs to be told. But do we take the time to get to know people's story? And if we're servant leaders, we do. That third thing is mentoring. And I know if you belong to Leading with Power, you know that's at the forefront of mentoring. And that's what Christ expected us to do in our own way, shape, or form. When he got ready to check out for the second time, I know he wanted him to go out 2 by 2. And I will hit on that and go out there and disciple. Some people want to go out there and scare people with Jesus, and it scares people. Or you can share people with Jesus. I try to share Jesus with to people, okay? And so I wanted my coaches. Now, my Trojan horse in the school, how am I going to get Christ into the public school? Got to have the Trojan horse. I use Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Great organization. You probably didn't see it on the back of their shirt was the cross. And they said, hey, you're going to take a lot of heat for that, Q. I go, that's okay. I'm okay with that. They want to fire me for... And it was a cross, vertically FTTP, and it was on the helmets as well, was faith to trust the plan. You see, as men, we don't want to trust the plan, right? Because guess what? I got the controls, God. And then I reach, like when I'm going through a tough time, I'm like, hey, where you at? He's behind me. He's right there with me. At the end of the day, I'm trying to teach my players to trust the plan. First, let's trust the football plan. Then I'm going to try to share Jesus with them. And if you looked, it vertically had FTTP, And then across it said BTS. And the BTS was burn the ships, which means you're all in. Christ was all in. Burn the ships, faith to trust the plan. Cortez in 1519 comes into the New World, and he wants to go into Cancun area there and exploit all the riches. And right before they get ready, for 600 years, they were unable to do it. And Cortez says, I don't know how we're going to do this. So he tells his number 2 guy, he says, hey, Matt, go up there and burn all of our ships. So all the men are on the beach, huddled up. They look out there, and there the ships are all on fire. So Cortez was saying, we're not going home unless we take their ships. So there was extra incentive. So when I talk about being all in, you got to be all in. And Jesus was all in. Ultimate sacrifice. And so I wanted my men to know, hey, everything we do, we're all in. So and then Fellowship of Christian Athletes, every year I would go speak to their luncheons and dinners. And in return, they never had anybody ever go to their camp from the inner city. And I said, hey, I'd like to get some of my players to go to the fellowship at Central College in Pella. So you can imagine me showing up. My son and I are the only Caucasians. We're at Pella College, which is the sister college of Hope, Dutch community. And $400 a kid, about $10,000. I got 28 kids get off the bus, and we show up at Pella, Iowa, and they get fire hosed with football and Jesus for a week. Now, do I know during their huddles or what's on their heart? I don't know. But I know I got to introduce Christ to them some way, shape, or form. But when we got there, my player said, hey, can I room with Clevante? And I told him, hey, you're not going to room with Clevante. You're going to room with a kid from Pigs Knuckle, Iowa. You're going to room with a kid from Montezuma. You're going to room with a kid from Sioux City. What was I trying to do? I'm trying to take these young men and show them we got more alike than we do different. Come on now. 1/16 of an inch is what the color of someone is. Come on, let's get over it. So at the end of the day, coaches, here we are, we're modeling, right? We're motivating, we're going to mentor, but the key was multiply. And as I said in the ESPN, I don't know where my wins and losses are until 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. And the kind of men they become, the kind of husbands they become. Because in the end, that's what it's about. It's about us getting to the hearts and minds of these young men. And I was talking to Lee, where are you at, Lee? Right here, about the limbic part of the brain. And here you got a Marine talking about the neuroscience. But the limbic part of the brain is what controls our emotions. You get emotional when someone tells you a character-based story or motivates you, inspires you. It goes to the limbic part of the brain. Some doctor here is going to tell me I'm wrong. Maybe I am. Prefrontal cortex, that's all about your planning, your critical thinking, your problem solving. But the limbic part of the brain is what I'm trying to attack today, so you don't have to do any thinking. And that's the emotional part, and that's how we make our decisions. I always told teachers, you cannot get to the head unless I go through the heart. And there's 2 universal questions that are asked all the time. Number 1, can I trust you and do you care about me? I've been to Jordan, I've been to Syria, I've been to Iraq. I'm telling you right now, universally, Korea, Okinawa, Australia, people ask 2 questions. Human beings, let's just boil it down. Do you care about me and can I trust you? And if the answer is yes, there's nothing they won't do. So that's how I hired my coaches. And if you didn't want to do that, it wasn't personal. You're just not going to coach for me, okay? Because it's not about us. We got enough people that think things are about us. So you got to see 2 great stories. My regret was 46 of the 48 didn't get to tell their stories. I'll tell you another story about them. But I want to talk about today. First, I didn't tell you why I'm here. I'm here because that man invited me, and he said, Sean, you weren't my first choice. He said all the good speakers were taken up, but we'll go with you. And then John said, Sean, right before I went up, he goes, just remember, no one's counting on you. And I was like, wow. I'm like, so with that being said, here I am. But really the reason I'm here, anytime that I can be around Christian men, where iron can sharpen iron, I jump at the opportunity. I had a prayer group up here circle around me, and Matt led it, and John led it. It was just so powerful. I mean, tears in my eyes, because we all feel at times we feel short of God's grace. I'm just being honest. When I was in that circle, I was like, wow, these guys, I can just feel the Holy Spirit. And I want to thank you for that. It was just powerful for me. And I needed that. I needed that not just for today. We all struggle, we're all wounded. But the way we all know to fix the broken story is to embed it in the greatest story written, and that's the Bible. The way to fix the broken story is you got to get knee deep. We got to do a deep dive in the Word. Because every problem in America today, I believe, the answer is in there. In our biggest deficit in America, people would say $22 trillion debt. We're ranked 23rd out of 28 industrial countries in the world. I say, no, it's leadership. I believe the deficit is leadership, because if you had good leaders, fiscally, we'd be responsible. I would think the 536, I don't know how you refer to the 536, that's the 435 congressmen and the 100 senators and the president. I look at their bank accounts, they're doing really, really well. Okay, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, the money that's not theirs, they don't treat it as if it is theirs. But at the end of the day, it's a leadership thing. So wanting to talk about today, something very near and dear to my heart is servant leadership. And some of the men along that have helped shape and develop me, and maybe some of the qualities that they had that I picked up on, is why, that's my message. So I'm going to transition. Before I do that, you got to figure out, John told you a little bit about who I am. I think you got a grasp of who I was in the video. I come from a small town in northern Michigan. I told Matt, don't hold that against me. I'm a diehard Irish fan, okay? So anytime the Badgers can beat up on the Spartans or Wolverines, I'm happy, okay? So know that right there. I grew up in a small town, but I got to take it farther. I got my father's pride. I'm going to be honest with you. I got my mother's compassion. I got my father's pride, which is bad at times, and my mother's compassion, but my dad gave us a great sense of history, of who we were, where we came from. My great-great-grandfather came over from Ireland in 1848 with a good attitude and a case of hustle. I think he had some want-to water, Lee, in his backpack. But he got there, he went to Michigan, starts farming. 1863, he finds himself in a small town up in Pennsylvania called Gettysburg. He's a 42-year-old private. He's on the western flank with the 16th Michigan, next to Joshua Chamberlain with the 2nd Maine and 20th Maine. There he is, 42-year-old private, okay? 2,100 Badger soldiers or Wisconsin Union soldiers were there that day at Gettysburg, 2,100 roughly. And I did not realize the great state of Wisconsin, you all from Wisconsin, is you had 91,000 serve in the Civil War. Unbelievable, the commitment and sacrifice, which speaks volumes to the great state of Wisconsin. Got great respect and reverence for these states that are willing to have young men give the last full measure. And so when I read that, I was like, holy cow, it's pretty impressive. 77% casualties during Gettysburg for the Wisconsin unit. So it was very, very, and that was a battle within that war that could have been really changed the tide. My grandfather, let's keep going down the lineage here because I want to tell you who I am. You don't know who I am unless I tell you about where I came from. We all know who we are because we know whose we are. Right? We belong to God. Because you never know who you are until you know whose you are. We know we all belong to God, but I'd like to tell you about my family so it gives you a perspective. My grandfather served in World War II. He was over in New Guinea 40 months. And after he got back, he spent another 30 years in the Army. His sons were, one was in Vietnam, one was I don't have my glasses on here. Arrow up, arrow down, there we go. That's sort of who I am, but I'm getting up to that point right now. My grandfather, uncle served Vietnam 20 years. My dad was in the Army for 3, and my brothers were in the Air Force. Well, I want to be in the Air Force like my brothers, right? I want to be like Mike. That's Mike right there. Now, Mike doesn't look like he's in Air Force shape. Mike beat to a different drummer. He was the oldest. He's with the Lord right now. That's my big brother, but he was in the Air Force and represented the United States Air Force at Normandy as one of their annual celebrations of Normandy. He represented the Air Force, and I wanted to be like him. And then my other brother, Pete, he joined the Air Force as well, so I'm going to be in the Air Force. Well, guess what? God had changed plans for me. I got a car accident my senior year in high school, and I shattered my hip in 17 places. I was in hospital for 56 days. And the doctor says, you're never going to run again, walk with a mild limp. I walk with that limp now, but never play a contact sport. So that was a prognosis. So you do what every other 17-year-old does in Pigs Knuckle, Michigan, is you can stay there, make minimum wage. I drove 1,700 miles in a Catalina, Pontiac Catalina, 1,700 miles to Liberal, Kansas. And if you've ever been to Liberal, Kansas, sort of like the moon, but less to do, okay? But I'm out there swinging a hammer. I know the business end of a shovel. One thing I do know, I know the business end of a shovel, which is work, okay? And I said, hey, I'm not going to do this the rest of my life, Lee. I guess I'm not going to. So I'm going to come back, dabble in some college. I go back, do the college thing, 2 years, no problem. Go to the Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And played baseball there and had actually pretty good job playing baseball, but my focus was not on academics like it should have been. Dropped out of school after having 3 years of college. Joined the Marines. 27 years later, I retire. And I have the biggest decision of my life besides the decisions I made in combat. And that was selected to lieutenant colonel, picking up lieutenant colonel in 2 months. Now, I've been in now for just under 27 years. That's like getting ready to take the head coaching job and then turn it down. I'm getting ready to possibly lead 1,000 men now and get them ready to go back to combat, Afghanistan or wherever. Or I check out. Well, I don't want to be the guy on the curb clapping as the heroes go by, but there all comes a time in our life when we have to get up on the curb and start clapping, you know. And I understood. I'm in the third quarter of my movie. I'd moved my family 20 times. As you can see, that's my wife and one of my daughters. I outkicked my coverage big time. Everybody else here probably did as well. But I outkicked my coverage, and I moved her 20 times, and I had to make a decision. And that decision, my pride said stay in, because we're all pride, right? Like, stay in, be a lieutenant colonel, okay? My son's 8 years old, and I'm like, you know what? I missed a lot of his life. I got to spend some time. Best decision ever made, I walked away. I mean, I had generals call me from all over the Marine Corps saying, hey, what's going on? I mean, your ticket's been punched, you're good. I said, hey, I appreciate it, but it's time for me to walk away. Very tough, because I'm a prideful person. There's my son, that's my brother right there, my wife. And so then I went over to North High School, and you got to see the video. So I got an opportunity to teach school for 7 years and coach football for 3, and I walked away because my son was playing football. And I got to coach him last year. They went to the state playoffs. And so here I am today. So that was a little bit about my story, and then basically why I'm here. And that's the servant leadership piece. And one thing I want to say, Henry David Thoreau, I thought he played for the Yankees, but he didn't play for the Yankees. I guess he was a nice literary giant. He said that a lot of men, most men are living, this is 1863, most men are living a life of quiet desperation. Holy cow. I think he was spot on. I think every one of us battle with that. So when I talk about people that have been influential in my life, and I'm talking servant leadership, I got to talk about the greatest servant to ever walk the face of the earth, i.e., why I got a picture of Jesus. They say insecure men are into titles and positions. Secure men are into towels. It is said that insecure men are into titles and positions. All of us that are leaders understand positions and titles come from above. True leadership is determined by those that follow, in my opinion. That's Quinlan's opinion. But secure people are into towels. My grandfather gave me a word of advice, and he said the quickest way to the kingdom. Where's the kingdom? That's where we're all trying to get, to the kingdom, right? We're all trying to get to see the head coach. He gave us the greatest playbook ever written. That's the Bible. He said the quickest way to the kingdom is through the servants' quarters. Whoa, what are you talking about? Servants' quarters? The downtrodden? Just like my great-great-grandfather said, this country gave our people a home. You're here to serve other people. You were on this earth to serve others. So the quickest way to the servants' kingdom is through these servants' quarters. The quickest way to the kingdom, I'm sorry. And he said, secure people are into towels. Well, what's going on there? I think it's John 13, 2 through 16. Again, I might be wrong with that, but I think I'm pretty close. They reserved the upper room through Trivago or Expedia or something, but they forgot to get the most important piece, and that was to get the servant that washes the feet. Okay? So when I want to talk about servant leadership and some of the great qualities they have, humility is number one. You think about humility. When I talk about humility, I talk about this. Pride is who is right. Think about that. Pride is who is right. Humility is what is right. Think about that. You know, arguments and stuff. But in the end, what is the right thing to do? Let's get past all this, partisan, all this stuff that we see that's going on in D.C. But at the end of the day, what's the right thing to do? That's humility. And I look at Christ says, hey, while they're arguing in there, I don't know, the disciples over there arguing, wrestling about who's the greatest, who's going to sit where, whatever. I don't know what they were doing. Jesus sees an opportunity. And he sees an opportunity. Again, he displays humility by going over there to do that. But he takes initiative, he takes action, and he goes over and he starts to wash the feet. And he starts to wash the feet, and Peter says, hey, I don't want any part of that. You know, so he's pretty secure. I believe great servant leaders are secure with who they are. They don't have an identity crisis, don't have to have their name on the back of their jersey, right? We got a lot of people drinking their own water, right? We got a lot of people drinking it, but Jesus was very secure with who he was and was very humble of who he was. And he says, hey, I got this. I'll do this. And Peter couldn't believe it. But if you think about it, he's getting ready to wash the feet of his disciples, and he knows Judas is going to betray him the next day. It's Holy Thursday. Friday's game day, right? He's all in on Friday. And he knows Judas is going to basically rat him out, and then you got Peter, who's going to do what? Peter's going to defy him 3 times. Okay? So you talk about an individual, the greatest servant, greatest leader to ever walk the face of the earth. I figured I better start with the impact Christ has had on my life growing up. Where am I at with my spiritual journey? I believe it's every single day I have to get after it. Because I'm going against something that's called the devil, Satan, and he wants a piece of me, he wants a piece of you. He hates this conversation we're having today. Satan doesn't like this. So my spiritual journey, and when I'm around great Christian men, at times I feel not worthy. It goes back to that Henry David Thoreau. Most men are living a quiet life of desperation. Why? Maybe some of us feel we're not worthy. We're not able to share our sins with others. I don't want to tell, Al, some of the things that I might have done wrong in my past. But if I trust Al and I know Al cares about me, Al's going to listen to me. He's going to give me good guidance. He's going to be there for me. Again, servant leaders understand humility. Servant leaders understand initiative. All the things that Jesus. So anybody that wants to look back and find things on leadership, I think you go to the Bible. There's some great examples of leadership. Going back to now, these are some men that had a great influence on me. That's General Renforth now. He's a 2-star general. He's from Wheeling, West Virginia. His father owned a bar there. His father was World War II, was stabbed at Peleliu. And his dad and mom say at 10th grade, hey, we're leaving. He lives in like a $5,000 home in small town Wheeling, West Virginia, and they're leaving him. He's saying, I'm staying, Dad. They're like, we're going. He stays. So here he is raising himself for the last 2 years of high school. He says, I keep thinking someone's going to come by and offer me a baseball scholarship. Never happens. So he joins the Navy. He joins the Navy. In his second year there, he took some tests. He said, boy, you scored extremely high in your test. You ever thought about the academy? You got to remember now, he's from Wheeling, West Virginia, very poor, extreme poverty. And he's like, no, I haven't. So they send him to Boost, which is sort of a prep school for 10 months. He goes to prep school for 10 months up at Newport, Rhode Island, and he makes it. So he's in the academy, getting ready to graduate. Here he is getting ready to graduate. Night before graduation, he goes out with some friends to have some beverages to celebrate, and he was always the protector. He's a short guy in stature, but he means what he says and says what he means. He's an unbelievable leader. I mean, he taught me so much about being a man, being a father, being a leader. And they get in a scuffle, and something gets broken in the store. Next thing you know, he finds himself in jail. So you just put 4 years into one of the greatest institutions. Think about it, the Air Force Academy. Think about the Merchant Marine Academy for the Coast Guard, West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy. Here's this guy. He's getting ready to graduate. Now he's going to have to go back and pay it back enlisted. He's going to go back and pay it back the 4 years. And there's a guy by the name of Major Mattis. You guys might know him as the Secretary of Defense. He happens to be the Marine liaison. 15% of the kids at the academy, they go to Marines. 85% go Navy. You have to have a Marine liaison there that helps them get ready to go in the Marine Corps. If you choose to be a Marine, Major Mattis. Major Mattis shows up on the scene. Now he's in a dilemma. He gets him out and says, don't you ever say a word. Whether that was right, whether that was wrong, whether that was different. He's a 2-star general. Fast forward, we're in combat. We're in Raqqa, Iraq, in combat. Who shows up? General Mattis. And we're on top of a building overlooking my city. of Rawa, Iraq, a city of about 30,000 people. And he said, hey, did Sparky was his nickname, he ever tell you about Dunkin' Donuts at the academy? So here he is 16 later talking to me on the roof in Al-Anbar province, the most dangerous province in 2006, 2007, the most dangerous province in the world of the 17, where I'm right there. And I'm living like a Spartan, as you'll see, living like a Spartan for 8 months, and he's my commander. And General Mattis says, Sparky says to General, when are we even? And General Mattis said, never. Well, we all know the end of the story. Mattis becomes Secretary of Defense. Sparky's a 2-star. He just got back from being charged of multi-forces Iraq, gets back 2 weeks later, has a massive heart attack. I show up on the scene. And wow, that was tough for me. He's recovering. He's up at the Pentagon right now. He's a 2-star. And he was a great American. One of the great things, his humility was this, again, talking about some of the qualities of servant leaders with Christ, is not comparing anybody to Christ, because you can't compare anybody to Christ. But he lived by Harry Truman's quote was, it's amazing what you can accomplish when no one worries who gets the credit. We've all dealt with people that want to say, hey, look what I did. Look at me. He lived by that. He taught me that. I had Marines killed and Marines wounded. He brought me aside. And I'm telling you right now, it ripped my heart out. And you're knowing that the family members don't even know. But thank God for this leader right here taking me aside as a leader of Marines and a leader of men. His mentorship was unbelievable. So when I look at Jesus is in a whole other category. When I look at regular men, it goes back to my model, motivate, mentor, and multiply. He modeled excellence. He modeled what right was. We would go to a patrol base, and talking about stories, he would go into a patrol base, and he would sit down with the lance corporals, the E2s, the E3s, the E4s, and he would sit down and play cards, like, hey, where's the colonel at? You know, you got to get going, whatever. You know what he was doing. He was a guy that never forgot where he came from. And he wanted to know their stories, but also, any good leader knows, you can get a pulse on a business or an organization by just spending 15 or 20 minutes with the people. 75% of people don't like going to work every day. I don't think it's the work. I think it's possibly the environment they're in. I mean, that's a statistic that's out there. But 75% of people are saying, hey, I work. And there's a reason for that. And I think if you had more servant leaders, people like this that I work with, you'd have more people wanting to go to work. So General Renforth right now gets ready. Hopefully he's going to take a division. But he was definitely instrumental in my, there's me right there, a younger me, 10 years ago. I'm briefing General Mattis. And General Mattis is like, man, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or whatever he's thinking. I don't know. But that's me on the top of the roof. And that's when he asked me, hey, do you know that Sparky Naval Academy, did he ever tell you about it? And I said, absolutely. He told me, he goes, let me tell you my version. So he goes on to tell me his version of what took place at the academy. Long story short, General Mattis, I tell you right now, he is the real deal. Whatever you saw on TV, he's apolitical. He could care less if it's a Democrat, independent, it doesn't matter. He wanted to go be the Secretary of Defense because his country asked him to do it. So it had nothing to do with who the president is or who the president is not. He wanted to go. And we are respected around the world when he went over there. He's just one of those kind of guys. He's in, right after 9/11, we're trying to get into Pakistan so we can go through Pakistan to get to Afghanistan. Afghanistan is landlocked. We couldn't get through. General Mattis, he calls it hand-con, but he's a voracious reader. The guy's read over 5,000 books, and he is a sort of a Renaissance man. He's a modern-day Renaissance man that's just a statesman. He's a scholar. He's a warrior. I mean, he does everything. And he was a guy that made sure that if you were going to lead Marines, you better have a depth of knowledge a mile deep in the culture that you're getting ready to go into. We're going into Iraq. You better have a depth of knowledge over these people, their customs, their traditions. And he knew if you're going to lead America's finest, the mothers and fathers have given us their greatest treasure, and that's their son. We have a moral obligation to put our best leaders in front of them. He had no problem relieving people. Some people are like, oh, he was hard on people. He took it very serious. So to speak about General Mattis, he comes in. So lead by example is another quality of servant leadership. He comes in, Matt, and usually the generals will fly into the COP, which is a combat outpost, like 15 miles from my city. I'm living in the city like a Spartan with the rest of my Marines. Most generals will fly in, get the brief, then they fly up the river, just because it is what it is. General Mattis, he wants to go into the city, which is, okay, oh, by the way, not only does he want to go in the city, he comes in, wants to go on a patrol. So here's the 3-star. He's getting ready to go on patrol, and he's not going to lead the patrol. And his aide's getting all nervous, like, sir, you know. Then he asked me, he said, are you going to lead the patrol, or are you going to give that? I said, no. I said, General Mattis is smarter than that. I'm not putting a dog and pony on. Whoever's on the patrol roster to go is going to be leading the patrol. Sergeant Vecchia from Boston. He looks like a kid from Boondock Saints, if you've ever seen the movie. He's got a big old sleeve tattoo, tougher than twisted steel. He gets up there and gives an unbelievable brief to the general, and the general on patrol with us. So here he is, and we're talking about this city here. 2 weeks before I took over, 7 were killed, 25 were wounded. 7 were killed, 25 wounded before I took over. I get in there, and the commander I turn over with has got a map, and he's got all these black routes. I said, what are these routes? He goes, we don't go down those routes. That's where we get attacked. So where do you think I put my patrol base? I put it right in the middle, right there, where all the intersections came, because that's where we're, you know. So my commander says, you're moving into the city. You're going to live with the people. You're going to win the hearts and minds. You got to live with the people. But General Mattis could not believe when we got there how we had basically righted the ship. It was still very, very dangerous. You know, people here don't know because the media isn't going to present it. But at the end of the day, you're talking 28,000 people, 5,000 kids out of school. Schools are open, banks are open, water's going, electricity's going, hospitals are going up. So most of our things that we did were humanitarian. Other than that, hey, you know, we're protecting the house to make sure they don't do harm to other people. But General Mattis is, again, had to possess those qualities, extremely humble, but I think he led by what I call excellence without arrogance. Think about that, excellence without arrogance. We're good at what we do. I'm not going to put it in your face, but it's just confidence. And he wanted that. His slogan was, no better friend, no worse enemy than a U.S. Marine. I come here in peace with the olive branches. But if you look at our dollar bill and what the eagle has, he's got a quiver of arrows there as well. No better friend, no worse enemy was his mantra. Okay, that's General Mattis. That's what he talked to us right before we're marching up into Baghdad, or when they marched up into Baghdad. That was his sign. So, men like him, you want to hit that? Do we have time for that? And I know I'm running low on time. But guys like General Mattis and guys like General Renforth, they're the ones that imbued upon me some great qualities that I've taken from them. Every one of us, we learn every single day from different people. But how much time we got? Oh my gosh. Get it back to my PowerPoint. Servant leadership right there. You see where my passion is. I promised the mothers and fathers of America, if I ever got the opportunity to come back, which I did, I don't know why, the Lord, multiple times there was a shot at me getting hurt and I didn't.